As aviators, we fly over a wide variety of environmental zones, ranging from extreme to temperate. The extreme zones are the areas of the world where high and low ambient temperatures, together with unique ecological conditions, require specific equipment for survival. If a forced landing is experienced in an extreme zone, without the necessary survival equipment, surviving long enough to be rescued may not be likely. In contrast to these extreme zones, the temperate zone has the most habitable environments on the planet. The majority of environments aviators fly over are located in the temperate zone. The temperate zone does not present extreme temperatures and conditions that can immediately threaten survival chances. Natural life-sustaining resources can be found and used in the temperate zone. The bottom line is you can survive a forced landing in the temperate zone. However, there are still explicit dangers present in this zone. Temperature, weather, and terrain are all threats in a survival situation. If a flight plan is filed, rescue is likely within 24 hours. For those that don't file a flight plan, rescue may take an additional 2 days. The goal is to survive long enough to be rescued. And to survive, a plan and priorities are needed. Establishing priorities in a survival situation is based on identifying those problems that threaten your survival chances. The most immediate life-threatening problems become the highest priority. The priorities for surviving any post-crash environment are first aid or survival medicine, shelter and regulating body core temperature, signaling, water and food, and maintaining the will to survive. Priority 1. First aid. First aid is the treatment of immediate life-threatening injuries and is your #1 priority after evacuating the aircraft and reaching your designated meeting place. Once there, survivors will account for all occupants of the downed aircraft and evaluate them for immediate life-threatening injuries. Use first aid kits, supplies, and improvised techniques known as survival medicine to treat injuries and stabilize survivors. Follow up your first aid by distributing water stores equally to all survivors. Water is crucial in any survival situation. Drinking water after a forced landing can help relieve adrenaline increases, calm anxieties, and prevent dehydration. The general rule in a survival situation is not to ration your water, but to drink as much as you can, when you can, and use your body as a canteen. After rendering first aid and distributing water, it's time to salvage the equipment and resources aboard the aircraft and establish a shelter. Priority 2. Shelter. The purpose of establishing a shelter is to protect yourself and other survivors from the environment and regulate the body core temperature. Hyperthermia is a condition in which the body core temperature goes above 102 degrees Fahrenheit, with extreme hyperthermia occurring at 104 degrees. The first sign of hyperthermia is profuse sweating. It's the body's attempt to cool itself through an overstimulation of the sweat glands. Profuse sweating is not a medical emergency, but it is an indicator that the body core temperature is rising and the body is losing water. Heat cramps are another medical condition produced by the loss of water and minerals through perspiration. The loss of mineral resources in sweat will upset the body's physiology and trigger intense muscle cramps, most commonly experienced in the calves and hamstrings. Heat cramps are not a medical emergency, but are a result of dehydration. The remedy for heat cramps is to stop physical activity, get into the shade, promote air circulation, lightly massage and stretch the affected area, and drink water if it is available. Heat exhaustion occurs when the body makes physiological adjustments in an attempt to lower the body core temperature. When the body's water percentage is low and its core temperature is elevated, the body attempts to transfer heat by moving blood away from the body's core. Blood vessels in the arms, legs, and extremities dilate to increase blood flow away from the core. This action limits blood oxygen flow to the heart, liver, and brain, creating a low-grade hypoxic state. This results in slower reaction times, labored and slurred speech, impaired mental functions, and physical exhaustion. The treatment for heat exhaustion is similar to that of heat cramps. Get into the shade, promote air circulation, and if available, sip water. Heat exhaustion victims should also be laid flat with their feet slightly elevated. Avoid drinking water too fast, as this can lead to vomiting and dehydration. Heat stroke will occur as the body core temperature begins to rise due to internal water supply loss. The telltale sign of this is when sweating slows to a stop, the skin becomes extremely hot to the touch, and the individual appears incoherent. This is a critical situation, so cooling must occur immediately and rapidly. The best course of action is to cool them from the outside in. If available, douse them in water and promote air circulation. Apply a cool wet cloth or cooling pack to the back of the neck. To avoid hyperthermia, adequate shelter, ample water, and the ability to reduce excessive water loss from the body is needed. Here are some ways to reduce excessive water loss from the body. Stay out of direct sunlight. It can be up to 30 degrees cooler in the shade. Wear clothing that provides protection from direct sunlight to the skin. Direct sunlight heats the skin and increases the body core temperature. A sunburn impairs sweat production in the affected areas. If available, wear a hat in a hot environment to protect the head and neck from becoming sunburned. Limit physical activity and try to perform necessary physical tasks during a cooler part of the day. Avoid smoking and breathe through the nose instead of the mouth. Don't eat unless there is plenty of water. The body can tolerate a lower body core temperature before survival would be threatened. During acute heat loss, the body will make immediate physiological adjustments to survive. Sweat pores close to prevent heat from escaping. Body hair stands on end to become more insulating. Carbohydrates and fat stores are burned at an increased rate to regulate the body's temperature. Blood is drawn away from the extremities to the body's core to keep vital organs warm. This helps maintain body core temperature, but subjects your extremities to a lack of circulation that can cause frostbite and frostnip. When the body core temperature drops to around 95 degrees, shivering begins. It's involuntary, quick, and constant muscular contractions of the body that generate heat. The shivering can be so intense that performing a simple task like starting a fire or using a signaling device could be very difficult. Once shivering starts, it will be important to find shelter and get warm. Shivering will eventually stop as body core temperature continues to drop. This is an extremely dangerous situation, as the body cannot generate heat, and death will occur unless the situation is reversed. Here are some suggestions to help regulate body core temperature in a cool climate. Wear a hat, as 10% of body heat is lost through the top of the head. Bring foods that are high in carbohydrates and fat. They are the body's fuel for generating heat in a cold environment. Build a fire. Every shelter and every survival situation benefits from fire. It provides heat, light, protection from insects and wildlife, and serves as a potential signaling device. Now that hyperthermia, hypothermia, and the importance of regulating body core temperature has been addressed, let's get back to establishing a shelter. Use common sense. Be aware of your surroundings. Plan for changes in weather and stay close to the aircraft. If there is no leaking fuel or threat of fire, the aircraft could be the best choice for shelter. But if it is too cold outside, it can become freezer-like inside the aircraft. Conversely, if it is too hot outside, the metal of the aircraft can create an oven-like situation. Since the aircraft is what rescuers will be searching for, establish your shelter in a location where you can keep an eye on the crash site. One viable alternative, if available, is to deploy an aviation life raft. There are many advantages to using an aviation life raft as a shelter. First, there is no need for construction. Simply pull the actuator handle to inflate it. It's made of rubber and the cells are filled with air, both of which act as insulators, keeping the shelter warm. The floors of some rafts are inflatable, which can provide insulation from the ground. And it's brightly colored, which makes it stand out as a passive signaling device. Avoid sheltering near sources of water when it is cold, since these areas are typically cooler and damper. Are you too close to a body of water that might overflow during a torrential rain? Are you too low in a valley? Cold air can sink, making it cooler near the valley floor. You may want to go to higher ground. When establishing a shelter, always look up. Will your location provide overhead protection, shade, a wind block, or help retain heat in the shelter? Protection can be as simple as a low-hanging tree branch, a natural overhang, or a cave. Looking up can also help determine if the shelter is free from danger in the form of dead treetops and limbs that could crash down during wind gusts. Ensure that the shelter isn't near an avalanche or rockslide area. Direct sunlight can be up to 40 degrees warmer than shade, and wind will transfer heat away from the body. When establishing a shelter, always look down. Is the ground hot or cold? The effectiveness of any shelter lies in its insulation. If in a hot or cold climate, insulate yourself from sources of heat or cold in that environment. Insulate yourself from surfaces or elements that might transfer heat or cold. For instance, pushing away the top 12 inches of dirt will result in a location for the shelter that is about 40 degrees cooler. If soil can't be removed from the surface of the ground, try creating an insulated layer with foliage or material taken from the aircraft. Kit-based shelters, tube tents, emergency bags and blankets, or even trash bags may be used to create a layer of insulation. Snow and ice can also be used as material to build a shelter. Snow and ice can serve as effective insulation for existing shelters. If the shelter is well insulated, warm it with body heat. Keep the shelter just big enough to accommodate all survivors, as a smaller space is easier to warm. The shelter should make a good signaling device, but if natural resources are used for construction, it may not be as effective in that respect. Your immediate needs for adequate shelter may outweigh visibility considerations. Make these types of decisions on a case-by-case basis. Regardless of the environment, look up, look down, stay inside of the aircraft, and use common sense. The idea is to shelter yourself away from the elements, eliminate potential hazards of the environment, and regulate your body core temperature. On to the next priority. Priority 3. Signaling. Is the emergency locator transmitter activated? Check that the ELT on the aircraft and any handheld ELTs are activated and transmitting. Prepare flares for use. Read the directions, ensure you know how to use them, and keep them available for quick use. To a certain extent, the length of time you'll spend in a post-crash survival environment depends on the effectiveness of your signaling. Here are some important things to remember when signaling. Know how to use a signaling device before you use it. Have them ready for quick use. And use them in a manner that does not jeopardize your safety or the safety of others. With a few resources and a good imagination, you can expedite your rescue. However, if rescue doesn't happen within 24 hours and your resources are limited, it's time to think about procuring water and food. Priority 4. Water. The best-case scenario is to enter the survival environment fully hydrated and stay hydrated until rescued. The average person requires about 2 liters of water per day to function normally in their everyday environment. Given the fact that most people are perpetually dehydrated, especially in the work environment, dehydration will be very likely following a forced landing. A hot environment will increase fluid needs from 2 liters of water per day to 3 or 4 liters to function optimally. Remember to always drink as much as you can when you can, and conserve water inside the body. Water is more important than food in a survival situation. Distribute, drink, and procure water first. Dehydration can happen in any environment. Consider the following when procuring water. How far do you have to travel to get it? What will you put the water in to carry it? Does it need to be purified? What is your physical condition? Here are some hints for finding water. Look around and listen. Birds tend to look for water at first light. They'll give you an idea of where water might be found. And look for animal trails. Most of them also lead to water. When water is procured from nature, be sure to purify it before drinking it. Some methods include using water purification tablets, boiling the water, or filtering the water. However, if the water can't be purified and it is a matter of life or death, drink it anyway. Medical conditions resulting from unpurified water will take a few days to manifest. Hopefully, you will have access to appropriate medical attention by then. Priority 5. Food. Food is the lowest priority. Humans can survive as long as 30 days without food. However, more food will be needed when it is cold because the body will burn additional carbohydrates and fat to generate heat. Remember, do not eat unless you have adequate drinking water. You should not need to eat for the first 24 hours after a forced landing. After that, use common sense and always make water the higher priority. Use caution with any food you gather. Eating unfamiliar foods from nature poses certain risks, especially if you don't know what you are eating.
Not bad.
Stay on task and maintain the will to survive. Don't give in to despair. Despair can be crippling in a survival situation. Despair can reduce survival chances, and in a group, spread. Stay calm, optimistic, and busy with jobs and tasks. Tasks will help maintain focus. In groups, jobs and tasks should be assigned according to survivors' abilities and strengths so as to keep everyone engaged. Focus on rescue and survival priorities. Priorities of survival include administer first aid and drink water. Regulate your body core temperature with shelter and fire. Focus on signaling. Procure water first and food if you must. Stay on task and remain positive. Additional survival tools, such as a sharp knife, a multi-tool, flashlight, parachute cord, and duct tape, could come in handy. With the right equipment, priorities, and mindset, you can survive in any environmental zone. For more information, videos, and training programs in aviation physiology, human factors, and global survival, please contact the Aerospace Medical Education Division, FAA Civil Aerospace Medical Institute, P.O. Box 25082, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73125. Call 405-954-4837 or fax 405-954-2305 or go to http://www.faa.gov/pilots/training/airman_education.